Hello guys, so I'm working with Reassembler on his port of Sonic the Hedgehog to the Amiga, and he told me in our initial emails how he was moving away from the dual playfield mode, which potentially could have locked us into a 16 colour prison whereby the blitter objects and the foreground tiles on the levels would have all shared a 16 colour palette. And that could have been quite difficult to achieve and really restricted the AJ Amiga and its capabilities in what it can display on screen. So the new approach, which I think is a much more freeing approach, especially with regards to the colour and the palette space that we will have available to recreate the Mega Drive graphics on the Amiga. We've gone for a sort of similar approach to how I tackled my tech demo for the ECS Amigas. Even though my one ran on AGA as well, it was primarily aimed at ECS, so I didn't use any of the 64 pixel wide hardware sprites that the AGA Amiga has to offer. I was locked into the 16 pixel wide sprites that the ECS machines have access to. But with this approach for Reassembler's Sonic project, that means that we are basically now going to be able to fill the entire background with sprites. Whereas if we were locked into the 16 colour foregrounds and blitter objects, we would have really had to sprinkle sprites in and amongst those bobs to produce more colours on the AJ machine, and I feel that this new approach definitely is the way to go. So with that in mind, the design philosophy going forwards is to reproduce the Mega Drive's background layer, or layer 2, in hardware sprites on the Amiga using a single 16 colour palette. And then that will free up another 32 colour palette that we can use for the blitter objects and the foreground tiles and things like that, the stuff that Sonic's going to interact with basically. So today in this video I thought I'd go through my process of how I took the Mega Drive's background layer in Green Hill Zone and then repurposed the colours and the palettes to work in a 16 colour palette for the Amiga's hardware sprites. So let's get started by bringing up the original Mega Drive background layer on screen here for you. Now I've put the colour cycle in. This is obviously not running in engine, this is graphics software just used to illustrate the background. But what we need to do here really to start off the proceeds is that we need to ascertain what colours out of the Mega Drive's original palette that these are using. So first port of call is let's bring up the original Green Hill Zone Mega Drive palette on screen to see all the colours that are used in that level. Now what we need to do now is isolate which colours the background layer is actually using, so we will overlay the palettes that are being used by the background layer and remove the colours that are not actually being used in that palette by the background layer. And as you can see, we're not using any colours on palette 0 or palette 1. All the colours are being used in palettes 2 and 3. Quite a lot of them actually. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up a single unified palette that just shows the existing colours in the background layer, but in one continuous palette, so we can see exactly how many colours we've got and if there are duplicates and whatnot. And now we can see that the Mega Drive background layer uses a comprehensive 20 colours from the Mega Drive's 64 colour palette essentially. And really we've got some work on our hands here because we've got to reduce this down to 16, which means we need to kill 4 of the colours in this background palette. So let's get rid of the Mega Drive's original palettes because we won't be needing them at the moment. And let's just focus on the palette colours we've got here. So let's give ourselves a nice fresh brand new empty 16 colour Amiga palette above the Mega Drive one, and that is what we need to aim for. Now right off the bat there are some colours that we definitely cannot touch, and they will need to be locked into our Amiga palette from the get-go. And the first of these is the water colours, or the colours that perform the water cycle. The shimmery water effect that you can see on screen is created by rotating each of these colours throughout the 4 slots that have been locked here in the Mega Drive palette. So basically those are non-negotiable, they must go into our Amiga palette. So let's pull them up into our Amiga palette and lock them in place. Now even with those 4 blues locked in place, we can see that there's quite a lot of blues to the left hand side of the Mega Drive's palette there. And because of the way this background layer is set up, it seems to me that the sky colour and the sea colour are both two colours that we cannot really mess with. We can't change them in any way, but maybe we can change the colour value slightly to balance the whole palette towards the end of this process. But at the moment we just need to lock those in place. So that means we need to lock in the light blue and the dark blue at the beginning of the Mega Drive palette, and then we need to move them into our Amiga palette. Just as a secondary note, the lighter blue at the beginning of the Mega Drive palette is actually the transparent colour in the Mega Drive palette. So anything that's coloured in that light blue is essentially transparent, which means the pixels in the sea here, all of those are transparent apart from the pixels doing the water cycle. So we can keep that in mind for later when we need to start editing what blues we've got left. So there we have 6 blues now in the Amiga palette, and that leaves us a total of 10 colours left to fit 14 colours into, essentially. All the colours highlighted in green here on the Mega Drive palette are fair game for editing, changing and merging, etc. So let's stay with the blues whilst we're on them. The first thing I'm going to attempt to do is I'm going to take the blue transparent colour and see if any of the blues in the arrangement at the moment can be substituted for the transparent blue. Essentially delete those pixels and delete that palette slot so that the pixels that would have been there literally just show through the blue background that the sea is obviously using. So let's move this blue along the line, and you can see here this is the closest colour it matches. So that is one blue we're definitely going to have to get rid of. So we'll get rid of that one. And the way I've got the graphics set up at the moment is that when we delete a colour, this bright pink will show through to highlight what changes we've made in the level so far. So at this point I feel like we've used all the possible uses of the locked colours in the Mega Drive palette. We've deleted one of the blues in the clouds, but there's not really much more we can do with those locked colours. And at this point, with the sort of 10 colours we've got left and the amount of colours we've got left to incorporate, I can basically see that what we really got to aim for is 3 blues, 3 greens, 3 oranges, and then a highlight and a shadow colour, which will fill out our palette, because the highlights and the shadows can be used to blend different colour ramps where you might be removing one of the colour ramps, for example. So that's kind of where we need to get to. So I think what we'll do at this point, we'll lock in the white and the darkest orange colour, the almost black colour towards the end of the palette there, as 2 colours that we cannot change, as well as the water cycle and the 2 blues used in the sky and the water. So let's move those into our Amiga palette and lock them in. Okay, so now we can see we've got 2 slots left for blues, we've got 3 slots for greens and 3 slots for orangey yellow colours. So the next colour in brightness from the darkest sky blue that we have is the first dark blue that we use in the clouds here. This creates the sort of outline of the clouds, and this colour can't really be merged with the lighter blue that we now have available or the watery blue. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at the other end of the spectrum and the lightest blue, because really when you look at the lightest blue and the white highlights that's both used in the clouds, these colours are really close to each other, and when a colour is practically doing the same thing as another, that's a good candidate to get rid of. So we're going to remove this very bright blue and we will replace it with white in due course, but for now we're just going to delete this blue. Now with that blue deleted, that leaves us the 2 blues that we need to put into our palette. So let's lock those into the Amiga palette for now, and then we can move on to another colour range. So at this moment we've got 8 colours left to incorporate and only 6 slots left in the Amiga palette. So at the moment the elephant in the room for me is the bright yellow. It serves as the highlight in the mountains here, and this looks like a good candidate to switch out for another colour, because it literally doing a single use case job of highlighting the mountains here. So let's put that yellow on the cutting room floor and remove it. So now finally we have to remove one of these greens, and then that will give us the 6 final colours that we will put into our Amiga palette and get that locked in place. In the back of my mind, I'm thinking I've just deleted that highlight yellow. What colour am I going to replace it with? It could be the white, but I don't think that would work very well. It's not saturated in any way with a hue that will be that will work. So for me, it's the highlight green that will be used as a surrogate for the yellow that we saw in the mountains there a moment ago. Now, one specific reason I had this in the back of my mind is something I noticed when only delving into Sonic recently, is that when you actually look at Green Hill Zone as it's flashing past with Sonic running through it, you can actually see that the little palm trees here in the foreground tiles are actually using a highlight green for its highlight rather than yellow. In my mind, it was always yellow. I don't know if you thought it was yellow, but to me, I always thought that highlight in those trees was yellow, but on close inspection, you can actually see it's bright green. So this is why I decided that bright green would be the best color to use for the mountain highlight. So what we're going to do is we're going to delete the darkest green here, and we will substitute that with the darkest color that we see in the mountain, because it will create a shadow like the dark green does. So let's say goodbye to the dark green, and then now let's move these last 6 colours into our first draft of the Amiga 16 colour palette. We can now remove the Mega Drive palette at this point because we no longer need to see it. We now have our fully locked Amiga palette, which we now need to reconstruct the background with. All these colours that are currently purple and have been removed from the palette now need to have something put in their place. So the initial blues that we removed, we know really what we're going to use for those. We're going to use the sea blue for the darkest one that we removed, and we're going to use white to double up. Then as we do this, you can see the clouds lost a little bit of colour density, but they don't really lose too much. I think the brighter blue that we've substituted with the sea actually brings the clouds out a bit more and gives them a little bit more depth, with the highlight blue being removed. So that works fine for me. I'm happy with that. Then the highlight yellow that we removed in the mountains, let's substitute that now for the green like it's done in Green Hill Zone. And there you can see it actually doesn't look too bad. Yeah, if you focus on it, it looks very green, but it still does the same job as the yellow. And now finally, the darkest green that was removed from the trees, we now replace that with our brown shadow colour that we reserved quite early on in the palette. And as you can see, where the green used to be, we've now got a sort of shadowy effect, almost like the trees have created a shadow over the top of the mountain range there. There is some slight problems in the trees where there were dark bits inside the trees. It makes it look like the trees have got holes now. But, you know, we can go into the tiles in Sonic Level Editor and we can repaint some of these holes out so they don't look too bad. Now at this point, we could stop and say, you know what, that looks good. That looks reasonably decent. It looks similar to the Mega Drive original. But I feel that the colours that were selected by Sonic team when they first created Sonic the Hedgehog, they were limited by the Mega Drive's 3-bit colour space, which means that there aren't many different gradients that you can use in specific hues for colours like you can with even the OCS Amiga, which is 4-bit colour. So we could now balance this palette to fit the palette around the changes we've made to smooth out those gradients and make it all sort of sit much nicer. So what we're going to do first is the main colour of contention for me in this whole palette at the moment is the highlight green. By taking the original highlight yellow colour that we had in the background and creating a mix between that yellow and the highlight green in the trees, in the middle of those two we find a nice green. We can now overwrite our highlight green with this green. Although the highlight in the trees pops out slightly more, the highlight in the mountain now sits more closely to what the original yellow looked like. And with this in mind, we can go through the entire palette like this. I'm not going to go through it now because it's just going to take a long time to talk through every single step. But with the magic of video, with going in and editing the tiles and balancing the palette, this is the final image that we ended up with for the Amiga version of Sonic the Hedgehog. And I think you'll agree that it actually looks pretty decent. In some respects, we've created a background that is slightly paler and fits better with the sort of distance that this background is actually sitting within the perspective of the game. So things that are further back will obviously be affected by, you know, air density and all that kind of rubbish. And, you know, I know this is only a game and it's not realistic, but, you know, it does work aesthetically in terms of, you know, when something's further away, the colors look less saturated and things like that. So I'm kind of happy with this. So that's basically it, guys. I mean, there's not much more to talk about. If you liked this video and you would like me to talk through in a similar fashion how I achieved the 32 colours for the foreground layer of Green Hill Zone, including the Mega Drive sprites or what will be blitter objects when we finally get them incorporated onto the Amiga, let me know and I'll create a part 2 of this video and I'll go through those changes with you as well. So, you know, leave us a comment, leave us a like or a dislike, hit the subscribe button if you're not subscribed, and I will see you in the next update. Thanks for watching, guys.